Well, welcome to Holy Week, folks. We were here on Sunday, but we have just started the Triduum, right? It's the 3 days, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and the Vigil. That is where we're at. And it's not really 3 separate services. It's all one service. It's all about the last several hours of Jesus' life. And we're going to walk through them as best we can. So would y'all pray with me before we get started? Almighty God, you have loved us, and loved us to the end. And you tell us to love one another. Help us do it. Amen. How do you say goodbye? That's kind of the question here, right? I learned recently, or it was pointed out to me recently, that I'm fairly bad at goodbyes. I was on the phone with a friend, just kind of talking about this sermon, the concept of goodbyes, last words, just generally the concept. And I said, I think most people aren't great about them or great at them, and I wonder why that is. Is it because we don't like the idea of something ending? Is it the avoidance of a sort of death of a thing, or an avoidance of death itself? Is that sort of the reason that we're bad at goodbyes? And he laughed and said, I don't know, man, but you love an Irish goodbye. And he laughed for a minute, and I realized that he was 100% correct. I love an Irish goodbye, an Irish exit. I love leaving without saying anything. I love disappearing and not letting anyone know. I get to avoid all the interaction that way. I get to avoid any sort of explanation why I'm leaving. I just get to go home with truly no questions. I love not having to interact with the very real feelings of a loss, no matter how big or small. It's uncomfortable to look someone or something full in the face and recognize that it's ending. Whether it's on a small scale, like a party with friends, or on a larger one, like the literal Last Supper of God on this earth. But see, in that Last Supper, at the Last Supper, at Jesus' final meal, we actually see the outline of a good goodbye. We see how Jesus says goodbye, and what does he do? How does he do it? He serves. He serves. He gets down on his divine hands and his divine knees, and he serves the people that he loves. He gives them a gift. Sure, something tangible, washing feet, right? But at this goodbye, Jesus gives himself. What he gives is who he is. Let me make sense of that, because what I'm trying to say is the gift that Jesus gives is far more than good foot hygiene, washing feet, bread and wine, water in a bowl, or any of that. Jesus gives himself. He shows exactly who he is, top to bottom, shows the disciples, shows us exactly who he is by what he does. Everything he does that night is a symbol, yes, but a symbol that points to something, points to the reality of his very nature. Jesus is what Jesus does. And what does Jesus do? He brings together the disparate community of outcasts and rejects and highborn and betrayers and serves them. Every one of them, without particularity, exactly the same. He takes this group of people that have come together for no other reason than that Jesus has brought them together, and he serves them in the lowest form available to him, as one who would wash the dust and dirt-covered feet of the people who would seek to follow him and live like him. And he tells them to follow him and live like him. He tells us to follow him and live like him. If we want to be a people who would be blessed, as Jesus said, we do what he did. So my original question stands: how do you say goodbye? I think for most of us, when we say goodbye, especially when we know it'll be the last time, it looks like trying to encapsulate all that someone has meant to us, or to say the most important thing we can think to say. That's the gift that we try to give. Jesus gives every bit of that and more here. He takes us from wherever we are. He gives us a community and a mission He gives us a purpose. He gives us a new way to live, to be, to move through the world. And that new life is in service. This is the new command, right? The Latin mandatum novum means new command, and that's where we get Maundy Thursday. This new command to wash each other's feet, to eat bread and wine that are body and blood, to serve one another, to love one another is intimate and awkward and uncomfortably embodied. And because of that, or as a result of it, we see that it's also deeply egalitarian, equalizing, democratizing, and it's subversive and unavoidably mutual. Washing another person's feet is awkward. Of course it is. That's the point. But it's awkward because it pushes on the boundaries of what we believe is right and proper. We see Peter's reaction, right? It made him uncomfortable, and then he got a little too into it, but whatever. The point is this: the gifts of goodbye that Jesus gives us are the gift of himself, the gift of a mission and a purpose, and the gift of a new community. This community, each member of this community, cannot function apart from each other at all, even a little bit. But if we're honest, that's just how life works. What I love so much about being a Christian in general is that I constantly discover that Jesus often isn't telling me or us something new about the way the world ought to be. He's just telling me how the world already is, and he just doesn't sugarcoat it. If we're honest, we recognize that there is no functioning alone. There's no me without you. There never was, and there never will be. There's no such thing as a self-made person. We are who we are because other people have had an influence, because life happens with other people, not apart from them. We may have experienced hardships and fought through them. I assume we all have. But to think that we got to where we are without the help or input or whatever you want to call it, the presence of another, is foolishness and arrogance. Jesus tells us to drop that facade of self-sufficiency that isn't real anyway, and to wash each other's feet. And maybe we can wash our own feet, maybe, but Jesus tells us not to, so stop trying. Jesus says, go and be a part of a community that is founded on mutuality, on caring for each other, on serving one another. Go and be a part of a community that isn't based on agreement or liking each other, where even Judas has a seat at the table. Go and be a part of a community that will include kings and vagrants, rejects, millionaires, betrayers, and the faithful. Go and understand that there is no hierarchy, that the first is last and the last is first, and everything is upside down. Go and understand that this community isn't about who has the most or who can do the most, but about Jesus Christ, Him alone, nothing else. And you know what? The two things Jesus does on his last night, the two things he does for his disciples, the foot washing and the institution of the Eucharist, are the perfect example and picture of this community that can't function apart from each other when it breaks down into rankings and arrogance. Each of these, foot washing and Eucharist, they demonstrate our dependence on each other, because we can't do either of them alone. In our church, Alan and I cannot celebrate the Eucharist alone. We have to have other people there. In a very real way, there is no bringing Christ's presence in the bread and the wine and the Eucharistic elements without the presence of other people. This is the reality we're dealing with here, folks. We need each other. And I'm not even talking about this in some sort of kitschy, hold hands and sing songs by the fire, feel-good way. None of this happens without each other. None of it exists outside of community. Having a life worth living at all, following Jesus, being united with Him, has to happen with other people. It's the only way this works. It's the only thing that's sustainable. Because honestly, As long as I get along with all of y'all, I will do something at some point to anger you. If I haven't already. Or I'll find myself frustrated for any number of reasons. And if I didn't believe in the reality of Jesus Christ being the thing that connects us and binds us, there's no reason to try and make this work. Because it doesn't. And it won't. Jesus Christ, the one who was and is to come, the one that went to the grave, the one who's getting up on Sunday, the one who showed us exactly who he is by what he does, he alone connects us. He's the only reason that any of this works. None of us can be nice or pleasant enough. Your clergy can't preach well enough. Your servers can't serve perfectly enough to make this thing work forever. We have to understand ourselves as a people that are brought together and sustained simply and solely by the work of Jesus Christ. On his last night, Jesus gives us himself. And in doing so, he gives us a new life to live with one another. He exposes our dependence on one another. And that's the gift. To see it as such is the only way to move forward, to grow, to progress. We have to see that as it is, for what it is, a gift. The greatest gift. He gives us himself, and he gives us each other. The gift that it is, the sheer grace that it is. I struggle to find the words for it because we just have to experience it, to feel it, to know that it's true, and we know that it's true. Let that confront you and comfort you, because the grace of God always confronts and it always comforts. You want good news? There it is. Jesus, light from light, true God from true God, gives us himself. And in doing so, gives us one another. So now, uncomfortable as it is, I'm going to practice what I preach, right? And we're going to wash some feet. I'm going to sit here and regret that I brought boots today. And I'm going to untie these. And Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, because I did not... We talked about it once, about how this was going to work. But I think I am going to sit in that chair first and get my feet washed. And people are welcome to come forward as you're comfortable. No one, all may, none must. But you are more than, some should. Hey, and I thought I was preaching. All right. But you guys are more than welcome to join me up here. And I will be the last one to wash another's feet to close us out.